On some nights, the world feels heavier than usual, like the kind of night when the snow itself seems to whisper secrets no one should hear. That was the kind of night Officer Ethan Blake found himself crossing Maple Creek Bridge. Midnight had settled over Vermont, the hour when most of the town was asleep, but trouble never really slept. Ethan knew that better than anyone. And yet, what waited for him on that icy span would be unlike anything he had seen in his 12 years of patrol. It would begin with an old woman, a starving dog, and a piece of cardboard. And it would unravel into something that would change lives forever. Ethan guided his cruiser across the lonely bridge, headlights cutting thin beams through the storm. Snow whipped across the hood in wild, restless flurries, hissing against the glass like needles. Below, the river lay frozen, a jagged black and white mirror of cracks that looked like veins in marble. The steel girders moaned above him, as though the bridge itself remembered every secret it had witnessed. Runaways, smugglers, desperate lovers, even a lost child he once rescued years ago. To most, Maple Creek Bridge was just a road. To Ethan, it was a place where stories came to an edge. At 37, Ethan was a man carved by years of discipline and solitude. 6 feet tall, shoulders squared from carrying heavy gear, storm-gray eyes that had learned to miss nothing. His brown hair, already touched with silver, clung damp under his hat. He carried himself like stone in a blizzard, steady but scarred. Wrapped in his thick Navy sheriff's coat, he drove another loop through the sleeping town, his breath fogging the cruiser's glass. No radio calls, no drunken fights, no alarms. Just the steady hum of the engine and the long silence of winter. Then, movement. At first, it was only a shadow under a sputtering lamp on the far side of the bridge. Ethan narrowed his eyes, eased his foot from the gas, and tilted the headlights toward it. The shape came clearer. A frail figure, hunched, clinging to something in the storm. And at her feet, a darker shadow, alive, shifting against the snow. His pulse quickened. He slowed the cruiser, tires crunching over ice. The closer he came, the clearer the sight became. An elderly woman, coat threadbare and flapping around her legs. In her trembling hands, a piece of cardboard. The words, though smeared with snow, struck him like a hammer. $20. Please, save my granddaughter. Beside her stood a German shepherd, gaunt and scarred, his ribs stark beneath his patchy coat. One ear was torn, leaving a jagged edge like an old battle wound. The dog's amber eyes blazed in the beam of Ethan's headlights, unwavering, fierce in loyalty, despite the hunger etched into his bones. Ethan's breath stalled in his chest. For a moment he simply gripped the wheel, staring. An old woman, begging with a cardboard sign, in the middle of a blizzard. A starving dog standing like a soldier beside her. The image was almost too surreal. Finally, he shifted the cruiser into park, killed the engine, and stepped out into the cold. The storm hit him at once, wind clawing across his cheeks and forcing his breath into clouds. Snow cracked beneath his boots as he walked toward the flickering lamplight. The woman flinched at his approach, her scarf fluttering but failing to hide the raw frostbite etched across her skin. She was perhaps 68, though suffering had carved years deeper into her face. Her eyes, pale and weary, flicked to the uniform but held no defiance, only fatigue. The dog tensed, pressing himself in front of her. He did not growl or bare his teeth. Instead, a low, broken whine slipped from his throat. It was not a warning. It was not even a plea for food. It was a sound of both protection and despair, of a creature stretched too thin but unwilling to surrender. That sound pierced Ethan more than the cardboard ever could. The three stood locked in the circle of light, officer, grandmother, and starving guardian, while snow thickened around them. Ethan knew instantly. This was no ordinary patrol stop. He let his voice soften, breaking the silence. $20? His eyes fell again on the trembling sign. What's going on with your granddaughter, ma'am? The woman's lips parted, her breath shaking in the cold. She hesitated, as though the truth might shatter between them. Then, in fragments, the words spilled out. She's sick. My granddaughter, 11 years old. Her heart, it doesn't beat right. Needs medicine we can't afford. The cardboard bent in her hands as her grip tightened. She still hadn't told him her name, yet the confession poured out as though she had been waiting all her life for someone to finally stop and listen. Ethan's chest ached. The memory of his own mother's final nights rose unbidden, watching her waste away in a hospital bed, too weak to fight anymore, the treatment too expensive, too late. That helplessness now surged back, thick as the snow around him. At her side, the German shepherd, Duke, she would later call him, shifted in the snow, his ribs pressed out against his skin. But his stance was iron. When she spoke of her granddaughter, his ears pricked sharply, eyes flicking not to Ethan, but into the distance, toward home, toward the girl. It was as though the dog himself carried a compass in his chest, one that always pointed toward Lily. Ethan crouched slowly, lowering himself until he was closer to their level. His boots groaned on the ice. His voice was gentle, coaxing. "Tell me, what's your granddaughter's name?" The woman's lips trembled. At last she whispered, "Lily Harper. She was born small, weaker than most, but she's bright. Loves to draw pictures of Duke, back when he wasn't too thin to sit still. The doctors say without medicine she may not live to see another spring." Her voice cracked, eyes lifting to his. They were pale blue, worn dull by sorrow and cold, yet deep inside, there was still a stubborn flame. Finally, she breathed her own name, almost as an afterthought. "I'm Eleanor Harper." Ethan gave a single quiet nod, committing it to memory. Eleanor Harper, 68. Grandmother with nothing left but a sick granddaughter and this dog. His gaze slid once more to Duke. Though his frame was frail, his fur matted, there was no mistaking the strength in the way he pressed close to Eleanor, guarding her even now. Loyalty radiated from him like heat in the frozen dark, unwavering, unbroken. His amber eyes never stopped glancing toward the horizon, always searching, always pointing toward Lily. It was as if he carried a compass in his chest, one that always pointed toward the girl. Ethan felt a pain. He recognized that look, the refusal to abandon someone you love, no matter how impossible the odds. He'd worn that look once by his mother's bedside before helplessness had crushed it out of him. Seeing it again in the eyes of a starving dog, carved open something he thought had long scarred over. Eleanor shifted on her feet, clutching the sign tighter. "I've tried everything," she murmured. "I clean rooms at the motel. I sew when I can. I begged the pharmacy for credit, but they turned me away. So, I thought maybe someone would buy Duke. He's all I had left to offer. $20 at least enough for a start." Her voice cracked, and her eyes dropped to Duke. The dog didn't flinch at the mention of being sold. Instead, he pressed his muzzle against her arm, a slow, deliberate movement as though reminding her that he hadn't left and wouldn't leave. Ethan studied the gesture carefully. He didn't need words to understand. Duke wasn't just a dog in her household. He was a sentinel, a guardian for Lily. Selling him wasn't just desperation. It was betrayal of everything he had been bred and raised for. The silence stretched, filled only by the hiss of snow against the asphalt. Ethan pulled in a long breath, straightening slowly. "Your granddaughter means the world to you," he said quietly, though it wasn't a question. Eleanor nodded once sharply. "She's all I have left. If Lily goes, there's nothing. Nothing at all." Duke let out a soft whine at the sound of the girl's name again. His body angled slightly, pointing down the length of the bridge toward the dark outlines of the mill apartments. Ethan noticed the shift. He felt as though Duke was saying, "She's there. Don't waste time with me. Save her." The sight pierced him deeper than any plea Eleanor could have spoken. For a long moment the three of them stood in the circle of lamplight, an officer weighed down by his past, a grandmother stripped to her last hope, and a loyal German shepherd, whose amber eyes refused to look anywhere but toward the child waiting in the shadows of town. And in that fragile silence, Ethan understood what the cardboard sign truly meant. It was not $20 for a dog. It was the price of one child's fragile heartbeat and the desperate cry of a family teetering on the edge of winter's merciless grip. The storm thickened as though determined to seal the bridge and its three lonely figures beneath white silence. Ethan Blake stood with one gloved hand resting on the cruiser door, his other hand still holding his flashlight low to the ground. His gaze flicked from Eleanor's trembling form to the dog pressed against her knees. The cardboard sign had bent under damp snow until the words were nearly unreadable. Ethan slid a hand into his coat pocket, withdrew his worn leather wallet, and thumbed through the bills. He pulled out a 20, folded from long habit. He held it out to her, not brusquely, but with a gentleness she hadn't expected. "I'll take Duke," he said. His tone carried weight, but behind it lay an intention she did not yet understand. Eleanor's faded blue eyes widened. The bill trembled between them, illuminated by the faint glow of the lamp. You'll really buy him?" Her voice was thin, ragged by the cold. She looked down at Duke, whose amber eyes fixed on Ethan with cautious intensity. Ethan gave a short nod. "I'll give you the 20. But not because I want to take him from you, because I don't want you standing out here selling what should never be sold." The words caught her off guard. Her lips trembled, parting as though she wanted to protest. But exhaustion forced her shoulders to sag. Her gloved hand reached out slowly, hesitantly, and she took the bill. The cardboard sign slipped from her other hand and skittered along the icy ground. Ethan reached down, picked it up, and folded it once before slipping it into his coat. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you off this bridge. I'll drive you home, and tomorrow we'll get Lily the medicine she needs." At the mention of Lily's name, Eleanor pressed the bill to her chest, her breath fogging in uneven clouds. For the first time, her eyes softened with something beyond despair, a thin flicker of relief. Ethan pulled the cruiser door open. Before Eleanor could move, Duke suddenly sprang forward, his thin frame leaping onto the running board. His front paws scratched against the door panel, his nose darting toward the open space as though he had been waiting for this moment. His tail, though, gave one determined sweep. His somber eyes locked on Ethan's face, bright with an unspoken vow. "I will not abandon them. You have my word." Ethan couldn't help the faint twitch of his mouth. "All right, Duke," he murmured. "Guess we understand each other." Eleanor shuffled forward, boots slipping slightly on the ice, and Ethan steadied her with a hand under her elbow. She was lighter than he expected, her bones sharp beneath the coat. He helped her into the passenger seat. Duke circled once before climbing into the back, curling his bony frame onto the blanket Ethan kept for emergencies. As Ethan slid behind the wheel, the cruiser hummed back to life. Heat sputtered weakly through the vents. Eleanor sat stiffly, her scarf pulled tight, the $20 bill still clutched in her hand. Heries stared straight ahead until slowly her shoulders loosened. The road stretched before them, twin lines of snow-covered asphalt disappearing into the dark. Ethan kept the speed low, his gaze flicking to the rearview mirror where Duke's amber eyes glowed faintly. The dog's ears twitched at every sound. His nose lifted toward the faint smell of home beyond the bridge. Eleanor's voice broke the silence. "Officer, I need to tell you something." She pressed her hands together as though bracing herself. "Last night when I came to the bridge, I wasn't alone. I saw men down there under the girders." Ethan's brows tightened. "Men? Doing what?" Her voice lowered, shaking. "They were moving crates. Big wooden ones, too heavy for just tools or furniture. They had a truck waiting at the far bank. I didn't mean to see it. I was only trying to clear my head. But when one of them spotted me, I ran. I thought they'd follow, but they didn't. Maybe they thought an old woman wasn't worth the trouble." She shook her head. "I was going to tell someone at the station, but then Lily's medicine. It pushed everything else aside." Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. Maple Creek Bridge had been used for smuggling before, but hearing it from Eleanor now struck differently. The coincidence noted at him. A grandmother forced onto the bridge for her granddaughter's survival. And beneath her feet, a crime she had no business stumbling into. He kept his tone even. "You did the right thing telling me. Don't mention it to anyone else until I've checked." Eleanor gave a faint nod, her eyes clouded by both fatigue and fear. In the back seat, Duke stirred, shifting his body so that his nose pressed against the side window. His breath fogged the glass, but his posture was calm. It was as if he too had listened and understood. His amber eyes flicked once more toward Ethan in the mirror, steady and resolute. The cruiser rolled on, headlights carving tunnels through the snow. Ethan said nothing more, but his mind raced between two truths: a sick child waiting in a cold apartment and a trail of men moving secrets under the bridge. Yet in that moment, what mattered most was that Eleanor Harper had accepted his $20. Duke had leapt willingly into his cruiser, and somewhere in the dark of Maple Creek, a girl named Lily still held on. The chapter closes there, the cruiser sliding through the storm, Duke's gaze fixed forward with unusual determination, Eleanor clutching the bill as though it were a lifeline, and Ethan Blake silently bearing the weight of a bargain made in the snow. Snow had thinned into a cold drizzle by the time Ethan's cruiser rolled into the center of Maple Creek. The town was small, its main street lined with shuttered storefronts and a few neon signs that flickered wearily against the night. ARI's red cross burned faintly through the haze like a beacon. Ethan pulled to the curb, his jaw set with quiet determination. Eleanor sat in the passenger seat, her face pale and worn under the yellow glow of the streetlight. She clutched the $20 bill so tightly it had begun to crumple in her fist. Duke shifted in the back, restless, his head lifting every time a passerby crunched along the icy sidewalk. Ethan cut the engine and turned to Eleanor. "Stay here. I'll get the medicine." She gave a weary nod, her scarf slipping slightly from her shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, voice brittle with both exhaustion and hope. She reached for the door handle. "I'll stretch my legs while you're inside." "Been sitting too long," Ethan hesitated, then inclined his head. "Stay close. Don't wander." He pushed open the door, the wind biting instantly at his face. Duke pressed his nose against the window, a low whine vibrating through the glass. Ethan gave the dog a steady look. "Watch her," he muttered, and Duke's amber eyes seemed to burn brighter at the command. Inside, the pharmacy was warm and humming faintly with fluorescent light. Shelves were lined with cough syrups and faded boxes of cold medicine. Behind the counter stood Helen Carter, the night clerk, a woman in her 50s with a round face and steel-gray hair tied back in a bun. Her thick glasses slid down her nose as she looked up, her sharp brown eyes narrowing. Helen had worked here nearly 30 years and was known for her brisk efficiency and her soft spot for sick children. Ethan placed both palms on the counter. "I need medication for a child with congenital heart disease." "Name's Lily Harper." Helen frowned, recognition flickering. "I know that name." "Sweet little girl. Her grandmother's been in before." Her tone softened as she reached for the computer. "They're months behind on payments." She paused, then straightened when she saw Ethan's badge. "You paying now?" "Yes," Ethan said firmly, pulling his card from his wallet. "Give me what she needs. The fastest acting dose you've got." Helen studied him for a moment, then nodded, moving quickly to fill the order. She'd packed the small bottle into a paper bag and slid it across the counter. "This will help stabilize her, but she'll need regular care." "I'll handle it," Ethan replied, scooping up the bag. He offered a short nod of thanks and headed out. The door chimed as he stepped back into the wet night. At first he saw only the blur of headlights streaking along the rain-slick road. Then his gaze locked on Eleanor standing near the cruiser with her scarf pulled tight against the drizzle. She lifted a frail hand as though to wave. But before Ethan could call out, a truck barreled down the street, its engine roaring far louder than it should have. "Eleanor." Ethan's voice tore out of him. The vehicle, a dark mud-streaked truck with no visible plates, swerved toward the curb. Tire schist against slush. Eleanor barely turned her head before the impact threw her backward, her body collapsing against the wet pavement. The truck roared past, fishtailing once before, speeding into the night. Its tail lights vanished in seconds. For one frozen heartbeat, Ethan stood rooted to the sidewalk, the paper bag of medicine clutched in his hand. Then Duke's howl shattered the silence. The German Shepherd had launched from the cruiser's back seat, claws scraping asphalt as he bolted after the fleeing truck. His body cut through the drizzle like a spear, muscles straining, jaws bared in a primal cry of fury. His amber eyes burned with a savage light, but the truck was too fast. Duke's paws pounded the street, his breaths ragged and steaming, until the tail lights blurred into nothingness. At last, he slowed, sides heaving, and turned back with a sound that was neither whimper nor bark, but something in between, a guttural note of rage and grief. Ethan dropped to his knees beside Eleanor. The drizzle slicked her silver hair against her forehead, her lips pale. Blood trickled faintly where her head had struck the ground. Her chest lifted once, then again, shallow and uneven. "Eleanor, stay with me," Ethan urged, his voice low but urgent. Her hand trembled upward, weak but insistent. From beneath her coat she pulled a delicate chain silver, tarnished by years. A small locket dangled at its center. She pressed it into Ethan's gloved hand, her fingers shaking with the effort. "Inside Lily's picture," she whispered. Each word cost her breath. "Promise me. Save her. The dog knows the way." Her eyes met his one final time. Pale blue, still glimmering with fierce determination, even as life drained from them. Then her hand fell limp against the pavement. Ethan's throat tightened. He held the locket against his chest, the drizzle washing across his face until he could no longer tell if it was rain or the sting of his own eyes. Duke returned, paws splattered with slush, sides still quivering from the chase. He pressed against Eleanor's body, nudging her hand with his nose, a low growl vibrating deep in his chest, his ears flattened back, his amber eyes glinting red in the streetlight. Ethan rested a hand on the dog's back. "I know," he murmured, voice raw. "I saw them too, and we'll find them. But right now, we save Lily." Duke's body stilled, though his gaze never wavered from Eleanor. Slowly, as though resigning himself, he shifted to stand guard at her side. His head bowed, but his frame rigid, carrying grief and fury all at once. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Someone must have called after the truck sped through, but Ethan knew they would be too late. The killers had chosen Eleanor carefully, silencing her before she could reveal what she had seen beneath the bridge. The medicine bag crumpled slightly in his fist. He looked from it to the locket in his other hand, then to the dog, whose whole body radiated loss. The night of Maple Creek grew darker still, but within it a new bond had been forged. A dying woman's plea, a child's fragile hope, and a German shepherd's vow written in grief and rage. The chapter ends here. Eleanor Harper lying still on the wet street, Ethan holding her locket, Duke standing over her like a sentinel carved from storm and sorrow. The drizzle had turned back into heavy flakes by the time Ethan finished the grim paperwork for Eleanor's death. His cruiser idled outside the station, steam curling from its hood. The locket rested heavy in Hish's pocket, and the unopened bag of medicine sat on the seat beside him like a cruel reminder. He should have been driving straight to Lily, but another truth pressed harder. Eleanor's accident had been no accident. Ethan pulled up the cruiser's onboard terminal and requested traffic camera footage from Main Street. The screen flickered before freezing on a blurry still of the dark truck. The plates flashed legible for only a second, Oregon tags smeared with mud but traceable. His gut clenched. This wasn't a local drunk driver. This was planned. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, the rasp of stubble harsh in the silence. His eyes drifted to the back seat where Duke lay tense, head on his paws but eyes wide open. The German Shepherd hadn't relaxed once since the hit and run. His amber gaze flicked to Ethan as though urging him, "We go back now." Ethan started the cruiser. The bridge awaited. Snow hissed under the tires as they rolled toward Maple Creek Bridge. The town was asleep, houses dark, save for the occasional porch light. The bridge loomed ahead, its steel ribs rising out of the fog like the bones of some great beast. The frozen river groaned faintly beneath, carrying echoes of secrets long hidden. Ethan pulled to the side, cut the engine, and stepped into the snow. His boots crunched over the iced asphalt. Duke leapt down immediately, nose lowered, tail rigid. The dog moved with purpose, snout sweeping the ground until he caught a scent that snapped him upright. He let out a sharp bark, then trotted toward the shadowed girders beneath the bridge. Ethan followed, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. The air under the bridge smelled different oil, stale river water, and something chemical, almost bitter. Duke stopped at a cluster of tire tracks etched deep into the mud, half filled with slush. Ethan crouched, tracing the grooves with his gloved fingers. Heavy vehicle recent. Nearby lay the splintered remains of a wooden crate. Ethan brushed snow away to reveal markings stenkled in black paint. False shipping codes, meaningless addresses. Inside, residue clung to the wood powdery and faintly acrid. His jaw tightened. Opioids, smuggling, maybe more. He found a packet of papers shoved under a rock bills of lading, half torn, stamped with a bogus transport company out of Portland. Enough to connect the dots. This wasn't small time. This was a cross-state pipeline. Duke's low growl snapped Ethan's head up. The dog had wandered further, nose pressed against a sodden pile of fabric caught on a beam. Ethan strode over and lifted it free. A black jacket stained with oil, heavy and damp. The scent clung sharp like diesel. Duke pawed at it furiously, then barked sharp and insistent. Ethan understood. The jacket belonged to the truck driver. A piece of him left behind. Ethan stuffed the jacket into an evidence bag, heart-pounding. His flashlight swept the shadows again. Something about the stillness felt wrong. Too still, too expectant. Then Duke froze, ears pricked. A faint scrape of boots on gravel carried through the night. Ethan's instincts roared alive. He doused the flashlight instantly and drew his sidearm, motioning Duke to stay low. The dog crouched, hackles bristling, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Another footstep, then the creak of metal someone shifting under the far span. Ethan barely had time to register the flash of movement before Duke exploded into sound. His bark tore through the silence, deafening, raw, a warning and a shield all at once. The sudden noise startled the figure lurking in the shadows. Something clattered a crowbar, then the sound of boots pounding retreat. Ethan dashed forward, gun ready. But the intruder vanished into the night, leaving only the echoes of their escape. His breath clouded in the cold, his pulse a drum in his ears. Duke returned to his side, growling low, his body trembling not with fear but with fury at the one that got away. Ethan knelt, hand pressing briefly to Duke's neck. "You just saved my skin," he murmured, voice rough but steady. Duke's breathing slowed, his amber gaze still fixed on the dark where the figure had fled. The bridge groaned overhead, the frozen river whispering beneath. Evidence lay scattered. Tire marks, crates, false papers, and the jacket soaked with oil. Enough to prove Eleanor had died because she had seen too much. Ethan straightened, the locket cold against his chest, the medicine bag still waiting in the car. He and Duke shared a look that needed no words. They had uncovered the truth beneath Maple Creek Bridge, but the fight was far from over. The chapter closes with Ethan sealing the evidence, Duke at his side, both standing in the swirling snow where Eleanor's warning had first begun. The drive to Maple Creek's old mill district was silent, save for the rhythmic swish of the wipers across the windshield and the low hum of the cruiser's heater fighting the winter night. The bag of medicine sat on the passenger seat, the locket pressed cold against Ethan's chest, and Duke lay tense in the back, eyes fixed on the passing streets as though he already knew where they were going. The neighborhood was a skeleton of the town's past brick buildings, blackened by decades of smoke. Windows spatched with cardboard, stairwells crumbling into shadow. Ethan parked beside a narrow alley lit only by the dim flicker of a broken street lamp. The building Eleanor had described was 3 stories tall, ivy clinging to its walls even in winter, its facade streaked green from years of damp. The entry smelled of mildew and dust, a sour chill that noted through Ethan's coat. He climbed the stairs, Duke's paws clicking softly against the worn wood. The second-floor landing was dim, the plaster walls peeled and lined with graffiti. At the end of the hall, a door sagged on its hinges, painted once blue, now dulled to gray. Ethan knocked gently. A faint voice from within, weak and weary. "Who is it?" Ethan kept his voice low. "My name's Ethan Blake, I'm with the police. I have something for you, Lily." Silence. Then a shuffle of small feet. The door creaked open a crack, and in the gloom appeared a girl's face. Thin, pale, framed by chestnut hair tangled into knots. Her gray-green eyes, so like Eleanor's, widened at the sight of the uniform. Fear flickered across them, Rawand unguarded. "I don't want trouble," she whispered, her breath shallow. "Grandma said not to trust strangers." Before Ethan could answer, Duke pushed forward, nose slipping through the gap. His amber eyes caught the girl's. For a heartbeat, everything stilled. Then Lily's hand darted out, clutching the dog's fur, and she broke into sobs. The door swung wide. Inside, the apartment was scarcely more than a single room. A rusted radiator coughed weakly in the corner, but gave no heat. The wallpaper curled like dead leaves, and drafts seeped through cracks in the window panes. Against one wall lay a narrow bed covered in worn blankets, and on it sat Lily Harper, 11 years old, her small chest heaving with labored breaths. Her lips were pale blue at the edges, her fingers trembling as she clung to Duke like a lifeline. She buried her face in his fur, her voice muffled by sobs. "Grandma didn't come back. She always comes back." Ethan felt his throat tighten, but he forced steadiness into his voice. "Lily, I saw your grandmother. She wanted me to find you. She gave me this." He placed the locket in her small hands. Her tears fell onto the tarnished silver, and she clutched it as if holding her grandmother's presence in her palm. Duke climbed onto the bed, curling his thin body along hers. The dog trembled as much as she did, yet pressed against her side, heat radiating into her small frame. He nosed her cheek gently as if to say he was here now, that she was not alone. Ethan knelt beside the bed, pulling the paper bag from his coat. "These are for you, medicine to help your heart." He opened the small bottle and measured out the dose. His hands practiced from years of tending others in emergencies. He held the cup steady as Lily drank, her hands shaking around it. The girl's eyes, red from crying, lifted to him. "Why are you helping us? No one else ever does." He met her gaze, storm-gay eyes steady. "Because your grandmother asked me to, and because you deserve better than this." The words settled into the room like a vow. As Ethan Rose Duke's head jerked toward a battered duffel bag shoved under the table. The dog sniffed hard, then growled low, pawing at the fabric. Ethan frowned, dragging it into the light. Inside were half-empty food wrappers, a torn blanket, and a plastic bottle labeled as heart medication. He unscrewed the cap and poured the contents into his hand. Tablets clattered into his palm, white and unmarked. He narrowed his eyes. Real medication should have had labels. Cereals. He crushed one between his fingers. It crumbled too easily, leaving a greasy residue. His stomach dropped. Not medicine. Something else. Poison. Maybe disguised. Ethan looked at Lily, already clutching the locket, and back at the false pills. Eleanor's warning returned to him with new weight. The dog knows the way. Duke had sniffed it out, exposing the truth. Someone had left this here. Someone wanted Lily dead. Duke gave another sharp bark as if confirming what Ethan already knew. His amber eyes glowed with purpose. The German Shepherd was no longer just Eleanor's dog. He had taken on a new mission, one written into his very bones. Protect Lily at any cost. Ethan sealed the false pills into a bag for evidence. His mind churned with fury, but he kept his voice calm for Lily's sake. "Don't touch this other bottle, okay? It's not safe." "Well, use the medicine I brought." Lily nodded weakly, eyes wide with confusion, but filled with a glimmer of trust now that Duke lay pressed against her side. She stroked his scarred ear, whispering, "Don't leave me." Duke lowered his head onto her chest, the steady rise and fall of his breath syncing with her fragile rhythm. A living anchor in a sea of fear. The room fell into quiet. The snow whispered against the windows. Ethan stood watch by the door, sidearm close, eyes scanning the shadows. The truth had deepened. Eleanor had died for what she saw, and now Lily was a target too. The chapter closes here. Lily clutching the locket and medicine. Duke curled beside her as if his body could keep her heart beating, and Ethan standing guard in the cold, crumbling apartment, the false pills burning like evidence in his pocket. Snow still blanketed Maple Creek, but the storm had passed, leaving the night sharp and clear. The moon hung low over the rooftops, silvering the frost and casting long shadows across the frozen streets. Ethan Blake drove with grim focus, the cruiser humming as it cut through the silence. Beside him, Lily sat bundled in a blanket he had taken from the station, her small frame trembling less now, but her eyes still glassy with grief. Duke lay across the back seat, his amber eyes never leaving her, every muscle alert as if aware that danger was far from over. When they reached the county safe house, a modest clapboard building on the edge of town, guarded by state troopers, Ethan helped Lily inside. The interior was warmer, a wood stove glowing, and a female officer named Claire Donovan stepped forward to greet them. Claire, in her mid-30s, was tall and athletic with auburn hair pulled into a tight bun. Her sharp green eyes softened when she saw Lily. Claire had built a reputation as both disciplined and compassionate. She had grown up in foster care herself, which left her with a natural tenderness toward children. "You're safe here, sweetheart," Claire said, kneeling so she could meet Lily's eyes. Lily hesitated, but gave a small nod, fingers tightening on the chain of her grandmother's locket. Duke pressed against her side, reassuring her without a word. Ethan handed Claire the bag of medicine. "She needs her dose at regular intervals. Keep her warm. I'll handle the rest." Claire studied him, recognizing the storm in his eyes. "You're not done yet." "No," Ethan admitted. "Not until I shut down the ones who killed Eleanor." Within the hour, agents from the FBI's Vermont field office arrived. Leading them was Special Agent Marcus Hale, a man in his 40s with close-cropped black hair stray. His square jaw and broad shoulders made him look more like a soldier than an investigator. Marcus had a reputation for patience and precision, the kind of man who spoke sparingly, but whose every word carried weight. He clasped Ethan's hand firmly. "We've been tracking the same smuggling ring for months. If you've got proof they're moving opioids through Maple Creek, we can end this tonight." Ethan set the evidence on the table. The oil-stained jacket, the forged transport papers, photos of the crates beneath the bridge. Marcus's eyes narrowed with approval. "Good work. We'll move on the warehouse." Duke, lying at Ethan's feet, lifted his head sharply, his ears pry-cricked, nose twitching as if he already sensed where they would go. Ethan scratched behind his scarred ear. "He remembers the scent. He can lead us straight to them." Marcus glanced at the German shepherd, skeptical but intrigued. "Then he's coming with us." The convoy rolled out just past midnight black SUVs with tinted windows, Ethan's cruiser falling in behind. They headed north toward the abandoned lumber warehouses near the state line. Duke leaned forward in the back seat, nostrils flaring as the cold wind rushed through the cracked window. His gaze sharpened the closer they drew to Theriver. The vehicles halted half a mile from the target. From here, they would move on foot. Ethan clipped a tactical vest over his winter coat, checked his sidearm, and tightened the strap on his holster. Duke pressed against his leg, tail low but steady, as if ready for the hunt. The team advanced in silence. Frost crunched under boots and their breaths hung like smoke in the air. The warehouse loomed ahead, its corrugated metal walls rusted, its windows black. From inside came faint sounds, voices, the thought of crates being shifted. Marcus signaled the split. Half the team flanked left. Ethan crouched beside Duke at the right side. The jacket he had taken held out like a lure. "Find him, boy," he whispered. Duke sniffed deep, his body stiffening with recognition. With a sharp bark muffled in his throat, he pulled forward, nose to the ground, guiding them along the tire-rutted path to the loading bay. Suddenly the bay door screeched open. A man stepped out, a cigarette glowing in the dark. He was tall, wiry, with a scar along his cheek and a beanie pulled low. Before he could shout, Duke lunged, knocking him to the ground. The cigarette flew from his lips as Ethan pinned him. Gun pressed to his temple. "Stay down!" Gunfire cracked from inside. Shouts rang out. The FBI team stormed the warehouse, bullets sparking against metal. Ethan dove for cover behind a stack of pallets. Duke Athos sighed, teeth bared. Marcus's voice roared commands echoing against the steel walls. In the chaos, a familiar figure bolted from the rear, broad-shouldered leather jacket, glinting with oil stains. The truck driver. Ethan's breath froze in high chest. The man who had killed Eleanor. "Stop!" Ethan shouted, firing a warning shot. The man turned, gun raised, and bullets hissed past Ethan's head. Before Ethan could react, Duke tore free, a blur of muscle and fury. He leapt, jaws clamping onto the man's arm, wrenching the gun aside. The shot went wild, ricocheting off metal. The driver screamed, slamming his fist into Duke's ribs, but the dog held on, growl reverberating through the air. Ethan charged forward, tackling the man to the ground. The gun skidded away into the shadows. For a moment the fight was raw-on, brutal boots kicking, fists striking. Duke clamped tight. Even as blood darkened his muzzle. At last, Ethan pressed the barrel of his sidearm under the man's chin. "You're done!" The driver froze, chest heaving. Duke released him at Ethan's command, but remained crouched close, lips curled, ready to strike again if the man so much as twitched. Outside, the FBI agents shouted, "Clear!" The last echoes of gunfire died away. Inside the warehouse, crates stood split open, bricks of narcotics spilling into the open. The smuggling ring had been caught mid-operation. Marcus strode in, his dark eyes scanning the scene. He nodded once at Ethan. "We've got them, thanks to you and him." His gaze dropped to Duke, still bristling, amber eyes blazing with the satisfaction of victory. Ethan patted the dog's neck, his voice quiet. "Couldn't have done it without you." The night air stilled, snow drifting gently once more, covering blood and footprints alike. Duke stood tall at Ethan's side, no longer just a survivor, but the key that had led them here, the guardian who had saved Ethan's life in the crucible of fire. The chapter ends here with the warehouse secured, the ring dismantled, and Duke's growl fading into the silence of a Vermont winter night. The warehouse raid echoed through the town for days. Maple Creek, long plagued by whispers of drugs and smugglers, finally breathed easier. The ring was dismantled, the perpetrators in custody. For Ethan Blake, however, the victory was only half the story. He carried another responsibility, one that had nothing to do with uniforms or badges, and everything to do with a promise made in a dying woman's final breath. Lily Harper left the safe house under his protection. The legal process for guardianship was slow, tangled with paperwork and hearings. But until then, Ethan had quietly made the decision. She would not return to that cold, broken apartment. His cabin in the woods, modest and weather-worn, would now be Herifuge. The house stood at the edge of Maple Creek Forest, a two-story structure built from pine logs by Ethan's father decades ago. Its roof sagged slightly under snow, and its porch creaked with every gust of wind. But it carried warmth within memories of family dinners long gone, photographs still hanging on the walls. Ethan had lived alone here for years. His life pared down to routine until this winter changed everything. When he first carried Lily through the door, her eyes widened. Thesmol of wood smoke drifted through the air, and a golden glow from the stone fireplace painted the room. She clutched the locket against her chest, whispering, "It feels safe." Ethan sat her down gently, his storm-gray eyes softening. "That's the idea." He had spent the previous night preparing. A spare room upstairs had been cleaned out, its dusty shelves wiped, a fresh coat of paint drying on the walls. In the corner, a new bed sat small with quilted blankets and shades of blue. Beside it rested a stuffed rabbit he had bought at the general store, its stitched smile slightly crooked but earnest. Lily stepped inside, wonder etched across her thin face. She ran her small hand across the blanket, then hugged the rabbit tightly. For the first time since Eleanor's death, her lips curved in something like a smile. Meanwhile, Duke trotted in circles around the room, tail wagging as though inspecting every corner to ensure it was fit for his charge. He hopped onto the edge of the bed, careful not to crush the quilt, and lay with his head resting on Lily's lap. She giggled softly, a sound fragile but real. Over the following days, a rhythm emerged. Ethan rose early for patrol, but now he made sure Lily had breakfast first, warm oatmeal or toast with honey. The townspeople, moved by Eleanor's sacrifice and Lily's plight, began dropping off supplies. Mrs. Allen, the baker, brought fresh bread every morning. Mr. Carson, a retired carpenter with stooped shoulders and kind eyes, delivered a rocking chair for Lily's room. Even the schoolteacher, Miss Green, a petite woman with spectacles too large for her face, offered to tutor Lily at home until she was strong enough for classes. The cabin became less a house and more a sanctuary. Lily, though still weak, gained color in her cheeks. She learned to venture outside, wrapped in Ethan's oversized coat, with Duke padding faithfully at her side. The dog would nudge her gently when her steps faltered, steadying her with quiet strength. In the pale sunlight of late winter, she stood on the porch, her hair catching the light, Duke's scarred ear brushing against her hand. One afternoon, Ethan watched from the yard as Lily took cautious steps across the snowy lawn. Duke pressed against her thigh, guiding her toward the edge where the forest began. Her laughter rang out when Duke suddenly flopped into the snow, rolling until he was covered in white, then bounding up to shower her with icy flakes. Ethan, standing there with arms folded, felt his heart tighten, not from sorrow, but from something rare and healing. The community's support didn't end there. Sheriff Tom Whitaker, Ethan's superior, stopped by one evening, his broad frame filling the doorway. With him came stacks of official documents. "Guardianship paperwork's moving faster than I expected," Tom said, his voice gruff but kind. "Guess folks upstairs know you're the right man for the job." Ethan's gaze shifted to Lily, curled up on the couch with Duke. Her small hand rested against the dog's back, her eyes heavy with sleep. He nodded slowly. "She's not just a case. She's family." Tom clapped him on the shoulder. "Then make it official." Weeks passed and the thaw of spring began. Snow retreated from the forest, replaced by buds and shoots pressing through damp soil. Lily's strength grew steadily with each dose of medicine and each hour of sunlight. The haunted look in her eyes softened, replaced by something more hopeful. She helped Ethan stack firewood, giggling when Duke tried to drag a log twice his size, barking in mock frustration when it slipped from his jaws. Ethan too changed. The cabin no longer felt hollow. There were school books on the table, a child's laughter in the hall, and Duke's steady breathing beside Lily's bed each night. Patrols became different now. Duke sometimes rode in the cruiser with him, officially sanctioned as a K9 unit. The dog's sharp instincts and loyalty made him indispensable, but his true role was clear every time he bounded back home, straight to Lily's side. The adoption hearing came on a morning bright with sunlight. In the county courthouse, Lily wore a simple dress Claire Donovan had bought her, pale yellow, that matched her new spirit. Her hair was brushed smooth, a ribbon tied neatly. Ethan stood beside her in his uniform, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. The judge, an elderly man with kind eyes and a weathered face, looked over the papers, then down at Lily. "Do you want this man to be your father?" he asked gently. Lily looked up at Ethan, her eyes brimming. She nodded. "Yes, he already is." The gavel struck, and the room seemed to exhale relief. Ethan bent down, pulling Lily into his arms. She clung to him tightly, tears spilling down her cheeks, but accompanied by a smile. Duke barked once, sharp and jubilant, his tail thumping against the wooden floor like a drumbeat of celebration. When they returned to the cabin that evening, the town had gathered. Lanterns glowed on the porch, neighbors bringing food and laughter. Someone had carved a wooden sign that read, "Welcome home." Lily, the little girl, stood in the doorway, astonished, while Ethan looked at the faces of his community and felt a warmth deeper than the fire in his hearth. Later, as night fell and stars glittered above the forest, Ethan tucked Lily into bed. Duke curled at her feet, eyes half closed but alert. Lily clutched her locket, now polished against her chest. "Grandma would be happy," she whispered. Ethan brushed her hair back gently. "She would, and she'd want you to know you're safe now. You're loved." The German shepherd lifted his head, watching them with quiet authority, as if sealing the vow. And so Maple Creek awoke to a new chapter, a child reborn into hope, a grieving officer turned father, and a dog who carried scars but gave only loyalty. Together they forged a family, not by blood but by choice, by courage, and by the stubborn belief that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Thestery ends with the rising sun spilling across the cabin porch, Lily's laughter echoing through the woods, Ethan smiling quietly and Duke standing sentinel strong, whole and forever guarding the home they had built. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or light from the sky. They come quietly in the form of a faithful dog who refuses to give up, a police officer who chooses compassion over duty alone, or a child who learns to smile again after loss. In their story, we see the hand of God working through love, loyalty, and second chances. And maybe that is the lesson for us all. No matter how heavy the night feels, God can turn pain into healing and loneliness into family. Every act of kindness we offer is a doorway through which His grace can enter our world. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us your thoughts. And do not forget to subscribe for more stories of faith and miracles. May God bless you and your loved ones with protection and peace. If you believe He still works wonders in our lives, write Amen in the comments below.